Out of all the movies I'm going to talk about, this is probably the one I would have wanted to see the most. Hey guys, it is Ian Lives, and I have a very interesting video planned for you guys today. Now, first off, I want you to politely ignore my messy room. I know how bad it looks, and I'm aware, but just ignore it for me, please. Now, I thought it would be a fun idea to talk about some horror movies that don't even exist. This is a topic that I've been really interested in lately. I've been watching a lot of videos about lost media. If you guys don't know what lost media is, that's basically like stuff that exists but has not been found. Different forms of media that is just lost and cannot be found. And this kind of falls in that category, even though it's not lost because it never actually went through fruition. But we are going to be talking about some horror movies that were either in production, planned, written, announced, anything that did not come out, that were canceled. We're going to be going over 10 movies today. How I found these is I basically looked up horror movies that have been canceled, and I went through different websites and lists. I did a lot of research. I'm going to be going over how far these movies were in production. I'm going to be going over some of the plot, obviously who was supposed to direct it, maybe even some cast members if some of these have cast members linked to them, and then also why they were canceled, and then my thoughts on how good I think this movie would have been. So we're going to start off with a classic horror director, and I think this one is very interesting, especially if you guys do not know about it. And this one actually went pretty far into production. I'm talking about John Carpenter's remake for The Creature of the Black Lagoon. This was supposed to come out in 1992. The entire script is online. You can read this entire script, which I think is really fascinating. So basically what happened here is John Carpenter was given the opportunity to remake The Creature from the Black Lagoon. And Rick Baker created the designs for the creature, which I will show on the screen. So this went pretty far enough to where there are pictures out there of the actual design for the creature. Now this eventually got canceled because John Carpenter's previous movie, Memoirs of an Invisible Man, bombed. It did not perform very well. That is his movie with Chevy Chase, I believe. That movie did not perform very well, so they basically told him, the deal's off, we're just going to shelve this movie. Which is unfortunate, but there are different sketches of the creature and, again, actual photos of the design. So basically, would this movie have been cool, is the big question. And it's tough to answer because 90s John Carpenter was very meh. There was a lot of bad movies that he was releasing. I love the dude. He's iconic for a reason. But his movies that released in the 90s were not very good. I think any John Carpenter fan can admit that. So I can't promisely tell you that this Creature from the Black Lagoon would have been good. Because I definitely have my doubts. But it's still interesting to see how far this movie really went into production, to where they already had the creature's prosthetics done, which is like the main part of the movie. So the next movie I wanted to talk about, we're going to be talking about some Rob Zombie. A lot of people know about this one, but Halloween 2 was supposed to get a sequel. There was supposed to be a Halloween 3 that was supposed to come out in 2011 called Halloween 3D. And I have this website pulled up. Says Halloween 3D was to be a sequel to Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, written by Todd Farmer and directed by Patrick Luzier. Although a script was written, so they wrote the entire script out, it was never produced, and no director, writer, or cast member was ever known to be attached to the project. So technically, Rob Zombie wasn't even confirmed, even though it was a sequel to his movies. He wasn't even confirmed to be the director yet. In 2015, the film was officially reported to have been canceled due to Dimension losing the rights to the series. But I also saw a couple articles that were saying that Halloween 3 was mainly canceled because of the poor reception that Halloween 2 got, which makes a lot of sense. The fans were not happy with Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. I think it did decent in the box office, but it did not get good reviews, which basically killed off the idea of continuing the Halloween franchise. Now, would I have thought that this would have been a cool movie? You guys know how much I love Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. I don't care for his first Halloween, but I love how different he went for Halloween 2. How the opening scene is awesome, and it kind of copies Halloween 2, which you kind of expect the whole movie to do. And then it goes into this really cool psychological horror thing with the white horse, which I love. Don't like the director's cut. Watch the theatrical cut. It's an amazing movie. Don't care what people say. I will always defend Halloween 2 and the original Halloween 5. Those are like the two horror movies I will always defend. I would have been interested in seeing Halloween 3D. I doubt he would have done a Season of the Witch remake, even though that would be pretty interesting if Rob Zombie... Again, Rob Zombie wasn't even officially attached to Halloween 3D. I'm just saying that to make it sound better. But technically, he wasn't even attached to that movie yet. So, Halloween 3D was supposed to happen in 2011, and officially got completely shelved in 2015 when they lost the rights to the franchise. So, there is no hope, no light for Halloween 3D. Now, this next one is very interesting because at first I thought it was a television show, but apparently it was supposed to be a movie. All the way back in 2017, Friday the 13th was getting a lot of love, a lot of treatment. Obviously, the video game launched, which was a huge deal, a major success, and I will admit that game was a lot of fun, and I already miss it. It was shut down officially back in December, which is sad, but in 2017, they were actually trying to reboot the franchise by doing a prequel movie that focused on Jason's father. Now, this is a very interesting concept because they didn't really talk about his dad at all. So it says right here, I'm reading this from the horror film wiki. Friday the 13th is a canceled horror film that was meant to be released on October 13th, 2017. It was meant to be the 13th installment in the franchise, initially assumed to be a sequel to the 2009 reboot. So people just assumed it was a sequel to that reboot, but there's also some reports suggesting that it would not be a reboot and would rather be a prequel. In production in 2013, was going to release in 2015, but Paramount had picked up rights, which pushed it back to early 2017. So this movie was going back and forth, back and forth. February 6, 2017, the film was canceled because of the poor box office performance of their other horror film, Rings, which Paramount did. Now, Rings obviously was the third installment in the Ring franchise that did horrible in the box office, and it got like a 8%. People do not like that movie. I have yet to see it, but Paramount literally used the Rings as the confirmation that people are still into Friday the 13th. I remember hearing about this. Basically what they were doing is they took the Rings, they took the audience's thoughts about the Rings, and they based that on how excited we are for Friday the 13th. For some reason, they thought that we're as excited for the Ring as we are for Friday the 13th. So they're like, okay, obviously you guys aren't interested in horror anymore, so we're just going to shelve this completely. And this Friday the 13th prequel reboot thingy got really far in production. There are actually screenshots and images of Jason's face prosthetics, his mask, his machete. They were deep into this thing, and I would not be surprised if there are some scenes that were actually filmed. Honestly, because this movie went pretty far in production. I'm sure the script was written completely. Next up, I want to talk about Peter Jackson's Nightmare on Elm Street that never came out. This was really dove into and talked about in the Never Sleep Again 6-hour documentary that came out, which I have yet to see, but it's a documentary completely about the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. So Peter Jackson, the director of the Lord of the Rings movies, actually used to do horror. As you guys probably know, he did Dead Alive, one of the greatest zombie movies and one of the goriest movies of all time. And he also did Bad Taste, which I have not seen. He pitched an idea for Nightmare on Elm Street 6 called Dream Lover. Now, this was before Freddy's Dead was even finalized, obviously. And basically, this movie explored a weakened Freddy Krueger, no longer a terrifying figure, and a group of teens who take sleeping pills to enter the dream world mock him. A very interesting concept where Freddy Krueger's a joke. He's a joke now. And these kids are taking sleeping pills to get into a dream with him just to mess with him. The story would also focus on a police officer comatose in the dream world and his son's attempt to rescue him. So I think these kids are messing with Freddy and he ends up killing one of them, which just sends the whole entire town into a riot. A very interesting concept, but it was pitched and unfortunately was unproduced. I think the script was even incomplete. There might have been some of it finished. Again, don't quote me on that. I'm using Google for most of this, and you guys know Google is not always right. But I would have been interested in seeing Peter Jackson's take on A Nightmare on Elm Street 6 because Freddy's Dead, as you guys saw, was my least favorite in the franchise. And I really just don't like how they went with that plot. Even like take out the stupid comedy elements of Freddy's Dead, it's still not a good story. This story seems very interesting. It's kind of meta in the same way that New Nightmare was kind of meta. Well, New Nightmare was really meta, maybe even overly meta. But Elm Street 6 Dream Lover sounds like it was going to be like a really smart movie, a smart way to approach the franchise, where instead of these people being scared of Freddy, they're actually mocking him. They make fun of him. They don't find him scary anymore. They find him as this kind of joke, which is, again, a really interesting concept. I would have much rather had this instead of Freddy's Dead. So I would have loved to see this. And I like Peter Jackson's horror stuff that I've seen, which is not a lot, but yeah. The fifth movie that I want to talk about. This one's also really interesting. So Freddy vs. Jason was a huge hit. Everybody knows this. It was like a summer horror blockbuster smash hit. Maybe it was fall time. I thought it was summer. But yeah, it was a huge hit. Everybody was wanting to see Freddy fight Jason for such a long time. So obviously they talked about doing a sequel. And I guess they really wanted the sequel to be special because they wanted to bring Ash Williams from Evil Dead into it. This is a real idea that was going to happen called Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash. This was going to be a real movie. The entire script was written and it was in production. So let me read some of this. Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash, also known as Freddy vs. Jason 2, was a planned American horror crossover film that would have been a sequel to the 2003 film Freddy vs. Jason. The film was suggested by film producer and comic book author Jeff Katz in 2004, whose plot for the movie would later be turned into a 6-issue comic book limited series. So after this movie was canceled, the producer was a comic book author. So he took the script after the movie was canceled and he made it into a comic book series, which you guys can buy and read. Which is how I first heard about this movie's existence, is because of the comic book series. So this movie is canceled in the fact that it's not a movie, but the story and script is still out there in entertainment, just in comic book form. And then they go over the plot. Set in December 2008, 5 years after the events of the film Freddy vs. Jason, and 16 years after the end of Army of Darkness, the story begins with Will Rollins and Laurie Campbell, the former protagonists from Freddy vs. Jason, returning to Crystal Lake to put closure to their experience. But Jason kills them a short while after and takes their decomposed corpses to a shack in the woods nearby. There's Jason enters a trance, and Freddy and Jason's mother appears to him. I'm not going to read all this, but basically he finds the Necronomicon with the power to resurrect him. He and Jason's mother convince Jason that he gets the Necronomicon. So basically, he's hunting for the Necronomicon. That's how Ash gets into it. Very interesting concept, and I do want to read the comics at some point. So, kind of sad that this wasn't a movie. This, out of all the movies I'm going to talk about, this is probably the one I would have wanted to see the most, just because I'm a huge Evil Dead fan. I would have loved to see this. It would have been chaotic, and yeah, this will never happen again, because both Robert Englund and Ash have both said that they will not reprise these roles, that they are retired from these roles. So this movie will never happen, which is unfortunate. The next one I wanted to talk about is actually more recent, 2016. Little Shop of Horrors was supposed to get another remake with Chris Evans and Scarlett Johansson in the talks. This was actually supposed to happen. Little Shop of Horrors reboot was previously discussed, with Greg Berlanti potentially involved. It appears to have been shelved with no current plans for a remake or revival in the works. There were reports in 2016 that Warner Bros. Was considering a remake to the '86 movie based on the musical, with Greg Berlanti, known from Supergirl and The Flash, potentially at the helm. So I do have to admit that I have yet to see the '86 movie. I know, it's one of those classics I still have to watch, but this doesn't seem very interesting or good to me. They would have made it probably too musically. And also the fact that the guy who made Supergirl and The Flash is involved is very scary, because those shows aren't very good. Bad acting, bad CGI. Yeah, I could not have seen this being a good idea. Obviously the studios didn't either, because they shelved it. So yeah, I'm not too bothered by that. Next up is going to be one that just recently got an entire documentary about this. And that is George A. Romero was supposed to do Resident Evil. Yeah, when I found this out, it really excited me. There's a documentary out called George A. Romero's Resident Evil, where it goes over this entire topic. I've yet to see it. I heard it's not a very good documentary. I'm not gonna lie. I've not heard great things about the documentary. But, I bet you they explain it better than I do. So, he basically wrote a script for Resident Evil in 1998. He wrote a pitch to make Resident Evil a movie. And so with one leaked online dated 7 October 98, the film was an ambitious, gory film with very loosely based on the 96 movie. So he was basically just making a very gory, over-the-top zombie film that was just loosely based off of the video game franchise. Resulting argument over the violent content led to it being scrapped, following a failed pitch by urban legend director Jamie Blanks. So this got tossed around quite a bit. They were calling it too violent, which is very interesting to me. Like, you guys don't want your Resident Evil movie to be violent? So they passed it to the urban legend director. That didn't happen. So then they got into pre-production of their own zombie horror film, which eventually resulted into Paul W.S. Anderson's film, The Undead, becoming the filmed version of Resident Evil. So yeah, this script and this failed idea basically sparked the interest in making a Resident Evil movie, which then passed it to Paul W.S. Anderson, who made the action franchise that we all know and love. Yeah, George A. Romero would have made a damn good Resident Evil movie. I'm not even a huge fan of the Resident Evil games. God knows I have not played all of them. I finished 7. Resident Evil 7. I don't even think I've finished any of the other ones, but still, George A. Romero has an amazing mind. 98 is pretty late into his movie career. He wasn't making mind-blowing movies at that time, but still, I think he would have brought something very interesting. Sad we didn't see it. And it just makes me more excited to hear how gory and violent it was. So violent and gory that they ended up scrapping it. And turning it into a watered-down Hollywood action movie with a hint of Resident Evil. For what, 8 movies? Yeah, so that's very interesting. I'll have to check out that documentary at one point. So, Beetlejuice came out last year, and it kind of sparked the conversation of how are we just now getting a sequel to this hugely popular movie? I mean, Beetlejuice took the world by storm. It had a cartoon, it had video games, it had loads of merchandise. It was an instant iconic character, instantly making Michael Keaton a household name. Like Beetlejuice making Tim Burton a household name. Beetlejuice somehow did not have a sequel, and people are always like, how did we get a sequel just now in 2024? Like, what the hell happened? In 1990, a sequel called Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian was actually going to happen. So all that I could find about this, Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian, was the name of the script to a possible second Beetlejuice movie, which was never made into production. It was written by Jonathan Gems, based on an idea by Tim Burton. So I think the script is out there. I think the script is written. And they go over the plot. Basically, the Dietz family moves to Hawaii to develop a resort. Construction begins, and it's quickly discovered that the hotel will be sitting on top of an ancient burial ground. Beetlejuice comes in to save the day. So Beetlejuice becomes a hero in this sequel, which is a very interesting concept that kind of happened in Beetlejuice, weirdly enough. It's a fun idea. They go to Hawaii to build a resort. It's on a burial ground. Beetlejuice is there. He helps out, fight the old demons. It would have been a fun movie. It probably would not have been nearly as good as the first one. It would have been one of those like cheesy sequels that are still fun but won't match up to the original. Now, would I have rather have seen this than Beetlejuice? You guys know I said this. I saw Beetlejuice in theaters. I wasn't huge on it. I thought it was okay. Very funny ideas. Michael Keaton was great in it. Arguably better than he was in the original. Arguably. But I don't know. I'm kind of glad that we got it years later. Because this Beetlejuice goes Hawaiian sounds like a fun idea, but like I'm not crying over it not being made. It's kind of whatever. So this one is very interesting. We're going to go back to what year was this supposed to be made? I want to say like 98 or something like that. Maybe 1980s. Maybe it was in the 80s. David Cronenberg. We all know him. We all love him. An amazing horror director who has a very weird and bizarre mind, who does body horror to a T, practical effects everywhere. Did you guys know that he was supposed to do his take and interpretation on Frankenstein? This was a real thing that was actually going to happen. It was promoted in magazines and everything. Like, this was going to happen. David Cronenberg was going to make a Frankenstein film. And when I heard about this, I was like, wow, that's interesting, because Frankenstein doesn't really speak to me as a body horror movie. Obviously there's like corpses and shit, but like David Cronenberg is known for being very bizarre, gory, and very practical effects driven. I don't really see that out of a Frankenstein movie, so I looked up why it didn't happen, and this is what Google has to say. Apparently the novel that it was based off of, he considered unfilmable. He said that Cronenberg acknowledged that a straight translation into film would cost over $400 million and would be banned in every country in the world. So David Cronenberg, I think there was a script written, but he was just like, I can't make this movie the way I want to. It will cost too much money and it will be way too gory. You guys won't even want it. So he shelved it. Yeah, unfortunately, basically he was saying, my idea is so extravagant and over the top, you can't even make it a movie. Very egotistical of him, but that's basically what happened. There's not much known about the plot. Again, the script was written, but I'm not going to read the entire script. I'm sorry, guys. But yeah, it's just interesting to know that David Cronenberg was going to make a Frankenstein movie. And there's even like posters and key art out there that I will obviously put on the screen. So, just a cool idea to think about. And last but not least, the last movie that I want to talk about, with the Freddy, Jason, and Ash movie, this one is also one that I would have been very curious about. talking about Rob Zombie once again. This was back in 2009, around when Halloween 2 was coming out. Rob Zombie was in talks to remake The Blob, the 1950-something and 1988 movie, The Blob. He was in talks to remake it, and there's even some concept art that was released years later. Kind of a lost media situation. They found the concept art and they released it. I will put it on the screen here. Way back in 2009, it was reported that Rob Zombie would be writing and directing a remake of The Blob, the 58 classic and the 1988 classic. He was heard saying, "I have a totally different take." He had noted it in an interview, one that's pretty dark. Basically what happened is he said that he did not want to be roped into the remake guy. He did not want to be roped into that. He said that he got a lot of hate toward fans for the Halloween films, obviously, and that he did not want to spend his next movie doing another classic remake to a horror film. So he basically said, "I don't want to do it." That wasn't the only reason, though. The production companies saw how poorly Halloween 2 did in the review department and how pissed it made fans, that they basically said, maybe you shouldn't remake The Blob. And they kind of took it away from him as he was saying, "I don't want to do it anyway." He then went on to start writing and filming Lords of Salem. So Rob Zombie's The Blob. Again, this one interests me. I don't know if it would have been a good movie, but I'm a huge fan of The Blob, and I think his over-the-top, raunchy comedy could have been fun, and a creature feature scenario. Because, like, just the thought of Rob Zombie making a creature feature is very interesting to me. But you also get the thoughts of, will it have the practical effects that the Blob 88 had? Will it just be crappy CGI Blob going through the town? You have to think about stuff like that. And also, it was basically confirmed that Sherry Moon would have been in it, because she is clearly in the concept art. You can tell that that's her with her raggedy dreads. So yeah, Rob Zombie was going to remake The Blob. And low-key, I wish it happened. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I thought it was a cool idea. Going over horror movies that were canceled, that never happened. Going over some of the plots and scripts and directors behind them, and why they were eventually canceled. Let me know your guys' favorite canceled horror movie down in the comments below. And maybe I'll do a part 2 if you guys tell me some other ones that were canceled that are worth talking about. Follow my Instagram at IanLives_. Follow my Letterboxd at wehateian. And I absolutely love you guys. Peace.